Call Alfred Naro.
Chair, I take a call on this bill. Mr. Chair, just want to make some comments. Mrs. Porter-Williams did actually talk about the look on my face when she was talking about the homes, the state houses that were in disrepair. And Mr. Twyford has his hand in his head in his hands because he realised what's coming. Because Mr. Chair, Mrs. Porter-Williams probably needs to talk to Mr. Twyford, because let's not talk about the conference at the community housing providers in Aotearoa in 2014. Let's talk about the Hansards, because that's right here in this house. And let's talk about when Mr. Twyford, on record in the Hansards, actually said this, and here are his words, where he said in the debate around the extending of income-related rent subsidies to community housing providers, his words, "We are not opposed, in fact, to the Minister's intention to shift the housing stock to community housing providers." And I love these three words: that makes sense. That makes sense. Mr. Chair, I have to say that Mrs. Porter-Williams has talked about her disgust. She may need to talk to her fellow colleague about her disgust at even him agreeing with the transfer of stock. The transfer of stock, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it doesn't make sense, but that seems to be the way it is. Mr. Chair, Mrs. Porter-Williams also talked about the state houses that are in disrepair. Look, she makes an absolutely valid point. Look, for any of us here in our roles of leadership and roles of responsibility, we'd want to make sure that the families that are in state houses do have homes that are warm, that are dry, and also too that would cater for their care and their well-being and their needs. Mr. Twyford was there, and in fact it's a pity because we had Mrs. Porter-Williams that was in our select committee, has been changed over to Mr. Twyford. We had the annual review for Housing New Zealand. Mr. Twyford questioned Mr. Glenn Sowry about the state of repair of those homes. He questioned that and where the conditions were of that. Mr. Sowry then, in his report, which I have here in front of me, talked about $400 million of maintenance and upgrades. He also followed that up with this comment to Mr. Twyford. He said, we have to say this, when he didn't say when the government came in, but for a long period of time, that many of those houses were in a state of disrepair. There hadn't been the focus, the energy and the effort to repair those homes. Yes, you may go on, but it's fact. Let's deal with the evidence that comes from the Housing New Zealand Corporation themselves, that for a long time there had been no attention to this. So what do we have now? We have homes that are warmer, we have homes that are drier, we have homes that are ventilated, we have homes that are heated for the care and well-being. Let's also too make up the point, because, and we're talking about the part 2, the transactional mandate of this bill. And I know that Mr. Twyford and Mrs. Williams have been talking about the great sale, the great state housing sell-off. Let's talk about this. In 2008, when the National Party came into governance, the current stock there was around about 62,000, right? As it is, of last week, what we were told, it's around about 67,000. That's what we're telling about. 67,000, okay? These are the homes. Well, here we have here, this was submitted to us from the annual review, okay? This is what came through. 190,000 people that are actually tenanted into those homes. What is important is here, now when we were talking about the so-called great state sell-off, so Tamaki Housing Redevelopment Company, the first transfer of the stock is around about 2,800. In comparison to what we're talking about, this isn't a huge sell-off. It's not 30, 40, 50%, it's not half of the stock. It's the stock that can go into the hands of a social housing provider that can meet their needs. And Mr. Chair, can I acknowledge Vision West out west? Lisa Woolley, Mark Bridges, who's the chair, and the work that they are doing. They are a fine example of a social housing provider. And here's also too from Mr. Twyford's own words himself, where he said that there are sometimes the need for another provider, and here's part 2, it's a transactional mandate, it's a partnership with a provider that has the means and the ability to meet a variety of different needs which the state cannot provide. However, what it does do, it keeps its responsibility of providing a housing provision, so the transfer of that stock, approved by Mr. Twyford, into the partnership of housing providers is the right thing to do. is the right thing to do. Mr. Chair, we know that the rent reviews, the tenancy reviews, was absolutely the right thing. In fact, Major Campbell Roberts was also part of that, Mr. Speaker, around that.